Today, we're going to be working with repeated identical and or similar volumes. The materials that you're drawing, the objects you're drawing should be man-made for this to work. That way they're more likely to be the same because there's infinite variations in a bunch of tomatoes and not so much in a bunch of coffee cups, which is what I'm going to be drawing. I recommend using a foreground, middle ground, background with an understanding that the objects will grow slightly smaller as they move into space. And I start my drawing by figuring out how much space I need in the foreground versus how much space I need in the background. And for me, it's going to be like a 5-to-1 ratio. So maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so if I know that I have to fit in 1, 2, 3, 4, before I get to the back line, I'm going to put my back line up here. I can erase it later if it's in the wrong place, but I want there to be plenty of foreground because I'm putting in 3 piles of plates. My first plate will be in the foreground, and because I'm looking at it across like this, there's going to be a discrepancy. It won't look round, it'll look like it's something in space. Next to that, there'll be another plate a little bit further back. Don't have to get it right the first time because we're going to work on it again. And then the next is a series of plates. Now, granted, I've told you already the one in the foreground, in my case, has to be larger. And then the next one has to be a little smaller. So I'm going to put it from here to here, there, to there, versus maybe here. And then it'll be narrower this way too. And then the ones behind will be smaller still. And so whatever this distance is, here to here, I'm going to have the plates, and I'm going to do the first one here, to there, and to there. And that's because as we go from foreground to background, things get smaller. This will be a stack of plates. We'll maybe go to there, maybe go to there. And then the top one, which is the only one I see most of, will be at the top of the stack. So something like that. Again, if this is really my cutoff, that would be the point that everything changes. It goes from there to there. Now I'm going to do the second part of this with my paper to the side because it's easier to draw a curve like this. And I also turn it so it's similar on the left and the right side. If this one comes more to a point, make this one come more to a point. And in addition to being smaller left to right here, it's also smaller in terms of how wide it is. This would be the widest. This would be the next widest, and this would be the least widest. And that is because as things move backwards in space, they become narrower as well. Each of my plates has a thickness. And similarly here, we'll see, and it's usually closer to the front than it is in the back because the rim will come higher. That's the way rims work. And similarly, each one of them, we see more of the underside in the front and less of it in the back. Usually it kind of disappears at the edge, so you can't really see that this is going to connect with this and this is going to connect with this, but that's what happens. I'm going to start by making the cup. And the cup, we know this is going to be closer to the front than it is to the back, and that there'll be a rim inside, right around there. And some suggestion of the underside. It will go up like this. It has to be smaller here and here. So it has to end a little earlier. I'm going to move this one because I want it to be closer to the one in the back. I'm going to make some marks for where the highlights are. I want to make sure that the highlights are still there at the end. And that usually means that I want to leave the color of the paper coming through. All right, so now I'm going to move on to my pastels. This is a chalk pastel black, a chalk pastel pencil, and a smudge stick. I'm going to use that for the shading. Now that I've done my first pencil drawing, one of the things I'm going to do right at the outset is put in some dark behind it, because that's the way it looks for me. I can refine that background later, but it helps me to know that I'm making the interior areas in relation to that dark background. Okay, I'm going to start with my blending stump now. I do this before I put down a lot of the darkest charcoal, because once I put down the darkest charcoal, it's harder to contain where the dust goes. I take up some of the dust before I smear it. And I just bring the gray up to the very back so it absorbs the pencil. So now I have to clean up the table because the table has gotten kind of smudgy, and that's easiest to do with my eraser. That is my kneaded eraser. It should just pick up smudges fairly quickly. But that's the idea. So hopefully you have some man-made objects that are identical or similar, and you'll be able to make a composition in charcoal and pencil, trying to show their relative size and relationship in space. Have fun.